Jim Harper had always been a night owl. His friends called him a creature of the night, a title he wore with a sort of quiet pride. After all, it suited his job perfectly. For the past 5 years, Jim had worked as a night security guard at the Metropolitan Museum of Antiquities. The museum, located in the heart of the city, was renowned for its vast collection of artifacts from all corners of the world. Ancient Egyptian relics, Greek statues, Mesopotamian tablets, and countless other treasures filled its halls. Jim's job was relatively straightforward: patrol the museum's sprawling interior, ensure the artifacts remained untouched, and report any suspicious activity. In truth, there was rarely any excitement. The museum was equipped with state-of-the-art security systems, and the presence of a security guard was more of a formality. Most nights, Jim spent his shifts in near-total silence, his footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. But as he would soon discover, the museum held secrets far more ancient and malevolent than he could ever have imagined. It all began with the arrival of a new exhibit. The museum had acquired a collection of rare artifacts from a long-forgotten civilization, predating even the ancient Sumerians. The centerpiece of the collection was a large, intricately carved stone tablet covered in symbols and runes that no one had been able to decipher. Dr. Evelyn Carter, the museum's lead archaeologist, was particularly excited about the new exhibit. She had spent years studying ancient languages and believed that this tablet could hold the key to understanding a lost chapter of human history. For weeks, she had been working late into the night, poring over the tablet, trying to unlock its secrets. Jim often saw Dr. Carter during his rounds. They would exchange pleasantries, and she would sometimes share tidbits of her progress. But as the weeks passed, he noticed a change in her. She seemed more and more consumed by her work, her eyes sunken and her demeanor increasingly anxious. One night, as Jim began his shift, he found Dr. Carter in the exhibit room, staring intently at the tablet. Her face was pale, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Everything all right, Dr. Carter?" Jim asked, concern evident in his voice. She looked up, startled. "Oh, Jim. Yes, I'm fine. Just this tablet. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. I feel like I'm on the brink of a breakthrough, but there's something unsettling about it." Jim glanced at the tablet. The symbols seemed to shimmer in the dim light, almost as if they were alive. He felt a shiver run down his spine. "Maybe you should take a break," he suggested. "Get some rest." Dr. Carter nodded absently. "Perhaps you're right. But I can't shake the feeling that I'm missing something. Something important." That night, as Jim made his rounds, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over him. The museum was as quiet as ever, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. He found himself glancing over his shoulder more often than usual, his senses on high alert. Around midnight, he heard a faint noise coming from the direction of the new exhibit. It was a soft, almost melodic sound, like distant chanting. Jim's heart began to race as he approached the exhibit room. He pushed open the door and was greeted by an eerie sight. The tablet was glowing with a faint, otherworldly light, and the symbols seemed to be shifting and changing before his eyes. Dr. Carter was nowhere to be seen, but the room was filled with a palpable sense of dread. Jim backed out of the room, his mind racing. He needed to find Dr. Carter and make sure she was safe. He hurried through the darkened corridors, his footsteps echoing loudly in the silence. He found her in her office, hunched over her desk, surrounded by books and papers. She looked up as he entered, her eyes wide with fear. "Jim, something's happening," she said, her voice trembling. "The tablet, it's like it's alive. I don't know how to explain it, but I think we've awakened something." Jim felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" Dr. Carter took a deep breath. "I've been studying these symbols for weeks, and I think they form some kind of incantation. A spell, perhaps. But I don't know what it does. All I know is that the tablet is reacting to something, and it's not natural." Jim's mind raced as he tried to process what she was saying. What do we do? Dr. Carter shook her head. I don't know. But we need to be careful. If we've disturbed something, it might not be friendly. Over the next few nights, the strange occurrences became more frequent. Jim would hear faint whispers and see fleeting shadows out of the corner of his eye. Objects would move on their own, and the air would grow cold and heavy with an oppressive presence. The tablet continued to glow intermittently, and the symbols seemed to shift and change with a life of their own. Dr. Carter was growing increasingly frantic, her sleep-deprived mind struggling to make sense of the chaos. One night, as Jim was patrolling the museum, he heard a loud crash coming from the exhibit room. He rushed to the scene and found the room in disarray. Display cases were shattered, and artifacts lay scattered across the floor. The tablet was glowing brightly, its symbols swirling in a dizzying pattern. In the center of the room stood a figure, cloaked in darkness. Jim could see only its outline, but he could feel its malevolent gaze upon him. He reached for his radio to call for backup, but before he could react, the figure vanished, leaving behind an eerie silence. Jim's heart pounded in his chest as he surveyed the damage. Whatever was happening, it was beyond his understanding. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. Desperate for answers, Jim and Dr. Carter began to delve deeper into the history of the tablet. They scoured ancient texts and consulted with experts in ancient languages and mythology. Slowly, they pieced together the story of the tablet and the civilization that had created it. The tablet had been crafted by a cult of dark sorcerers who worshipped a malevolent deity known as Azeroth. The cult had used the tablet to summon and bind the spirit of Azeroth, trapping it within the stone. For centuries, the tablet had remained hidden, its power dormant. But by bringing the tablet to the museum and studying its symbols, Dr. Carter had inadvertently begun to unravel the bindings that held Azeroth captive. The entity was growing stronger with each passing day, its influence spreading throughout the museum. Dr. Carter was racked with guilt. "It's my fault," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I've unleashed something terrible." Jim placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We didn't know. But now we need to find a way to stop it." Together, they devised a plan. If the tablet could be used to summon and bind Azeroth, then perhaps it could also be used to banish it. They would need to perform a ritual, using the incantations on the tablet to reverse the summoning. As midnight approached, Jim and Dr. Carter gathered the necessary materials for the ritual. They set up a makeshift altar in the exhibit room, placing the tablet at its center. Dr. Carter had translated the incantations and carefully written them out on a piece of parchment. The air was thick with tension as they began the ritual. Dr. Carter recited the incantations, her voice steady but filled with determination. Jim stood guard, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. As Dr. Carter's voice grew louder, the tablet began to glow with an intense, blinding light. The symbols swirled and pulsed, filling the room with an eerie, otherworldly energy. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and a chilling wind swept through the room. The figure from before appeared once more, its dark form coalescing in front of them. Jim's heart pounded as he faced the entity, his mind racing with fear and determination. Dr. Carter continued to chant, her voice unwavering. The figure writhed and twisted, its form flickering as if struggling against an invisible force. Jim could feel the air crackling with energy, the power of the ritual reaching its peak. With a final, thunderous shout, Dr. Carter completed the incantation. The figure let out a horrifying, otherworldly scream as it was drawn back into the tablet. The room was filled with a blinding flash of light, and then, just as suddenly, everything went still. As the light faded, Jim and Dr. Carter found themselves alone in the silent exhibit room. The tablet lay on the altar, its glow extinguished. The air was calm, and the oppressive presence had vanished. They had done it. They had banished Azeroth and sealed the tablet's power once more. Dr. Carter sank to the floor, exhausted but relieved. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." Jim helped her to her feet, his own heart still pounding with adrenaline. "We did it. We stopped it." In the days that followed, the museum returned to its normal, peaceful state. The strange occurrences ceased, and the artifacts remained undisturbed. Dr. Carter took a leave of absence to recover from the ordeal, while Jim continued his nightly patrols, ever vigilant. They had faced a darkness beyond their understanding and emerged victorious. But Jim knew that the world was full of ancient, hidden dangers, and he would never let his guard down again. Months later, the museum prepared to unveil a new exhibit, one that promised to be just as intriguing as the last. Jim watched as the staff set up the displays, his mind drifting back to the events of those fateful nights. Dr. Carter had returned, her passion for archaeology undiminished but tempered by a newfound caution. She approached Jim one evening, a small smile on her face. "Ready for the next adventure?" she asked. Jim chuckled. "As ready as I'll ever be." They stood together, watching as the final preparations were made. The museum was a place of wonder and discovery, but it was also a place where the past could come to life in ways they could never predict. And as long as Jim was there, he would be ready to face whatever darkness might arise, guarding the treasures of the past and protecting the future from their ancient, hidden secrets.